Greetings, everyone. I am Dr. John Berry, and welcome to CrossTalk Waterloo. We are in the business of exploring the Cedar Valley, and today we're looking at diversity within the greater Cedar Valley. Joining us is Gwenne Berry, Chief Diversity Officer at the University of Northern Iowa. Stay with us. Hi, and welcome back to Crosstalk Waterloo. Today we have a special guest, Gwenne Berry, Chief Diversity Officer at the University of Northern Iowa. I know Gwen just a little bit. Would you say I know you just a
I
little
would
bit?
say we know each other fairly well,
Yeah.
Dr. Berry.
Oh, okay. Well, yes. And, for those of you who don't know, full disclosure, Gwen is my personal CEO, i.e. my wife, for those of you who are married. But more importantly, this is Gwen acting in the professional capacity as Chief Diversity Officer. So since I know a little bit about you, can you kindly convey something about yourself in terms of your background? I know that you are a native Waterlooan, and give the audience some idea of Gwenne Berry.
Absolutely.
Culpeper.
I was born Gwen Culpeper, Gwenne Berry now. Iowa State grad, University of Northern Iowa grad as well. I've worked at the university now for just over 25 years.
And you look just 19 years of age.
That's because I started when I was 12.
Oh, okay.
I have held 3 positions there. I worked in public relations. That's where I started. From there, went on to compliance and equity management, where I was the university's primary investigator for all cases of harassment, discrimination, sexual assault. And 3 years ago was named our first chief diversity officer.
Okay.
It's a position that we have been, I joke that we're building the plane while we fly it at the same time. We are sort of deciding what it is we need as a chief diversity officer. Every institution will tell you that their needs are different when it comes to diversity, and UNI is finding out that we have to have our own plan and our own approach. We can't do what Iowa State does. We can't do what Luther does. We have to do what works for the University of Northern Iowa.
Okay. So tell the listening audience, you started out undergrad where?
I originally went to Spelman College.
Okay.
Homesick because I hadn't been away from home by myself ever. And then I transferred to Iowa State, graduated from Iowa State with a degree in journalism, a minor in English.
Is that why you correct me all the time at home?
It is.
Okay, good.
I enjoy it. Then I started working for the Waterloo Courier, actually. Was my first job as a reporter, and then went on to the University of Northern Iowa, earned my master's degree while I was there, and started working for compliance and equity management. People asked me all the time, how can you do that kind of work? But I found it extremely interesting, probably because I'm inherently nosy. But investigations are, for me, interesting. They're very much like a puzzle, finding all of the pieces to put the story together.
And now that you're the Chief Diversity Officer, boy, do you have a large puzzle, and congratulations to you and to the Board of Regents and to the university leadership, Dr. President Nook. Chief Diversity Officer, so often when individuals think of Chief Diversity Officer, the first thing that comes to mind is African American.
Yes.
Can you let the listening audience, viewing audience, know what's in your portfolio as Chief Diversity Officer and not just African Americans?
Well, we have to look at diversity in a broad sense, because what we are looking at traditionally is populations that have been marginalized, that have not had the same opportunities that other populations have had. Now, you go all the way back to affirmative action, and you are talking solely about African Americans. That the Affirmative Action Act is all about the Civil Rights Act, originally was all about African Americans. But there are numbers of people who have been marginalized. That includes people who are gay. That includes our military veterans, believe it or not.
That's an interesting one, yes.
Yes, it is. That includes, people who are disabled. That includes people who may not be Christian. So all of those fall into my portfolio, and not just African American anymore. When we talk about race and ethnicity, that also includes everyone who isn't white, because people who have melanin in their skin are very quickly and easily counted out. They don't get the same opportunities. And my job, when I was in compliance and equity management, was when I wasn't investigating, was about looking at all of the searches that the institution conducted to make sure, when I looked at resumes, that we aren't counting out women. We aren't counting out someone who has very similar experience to these three people that we've decided to interview, but you haven't chosen them, maybe because you have a bias. And we're more likely to say bias these days, too.
Our outstanding executive director, William K., that was his first question: how deep is your portfolio? So the interesting one for me would be the veterans, and also all people of color. What about women? Are women still classified, regardless of race, creed, or color, in that particular protected class?
They definitely are considered a protected class, but it depends on where you are looking. For instance, women are not in short supply when you are hiring nurses, for instance. So when you talk about diversity among nurses, you might be talking about hiring more men. You will find that there are lots of women who go into the teaching profession. But so you may be talking again about men in those areas. It all depends on what area that you're talking about. You said you found it interesting that military veterans are considered among marginalized populations. Military veterans have very, very specific needs. They are my easiest population to deal with, but they're also my hardest population to deal with. At UNI, we have a military veteran student services center. We've outgrown that. We have well over 300 individuals who have self-identified as students who are also military veterans. So we don't have enough space there, but we do have an assistant director there to work with them. But some of the issues, for instance, if you've been in combat for a couple of years, when we bring you back to civilian life, the sorts of things that are going to make life a little uncomfortable for you are the sorts of things that a professor is not looking for. For instance, we always tell our students, sit up front. That's where the A students sit. That's exactly where a military vet doesn't want to sit, because they don't know what's behind that podium.
Wow.
They want a good view of the room. They may want to sit in the back. They are also, things like just regular old traffic can be a little stressful for them, because if you've been in combat and you've been driving in, say, Baghdad, where a woman crossing the street, a child crossing the street could be the person who's carrying a bomb, could be the end of you. You don't drive like you drive down University Avenue. You are trying to get down that street. You are bumping things to get them out of your way, and it's stressful when there are cars on all sides of you. That's been your life for 2 years or 4 years or 6 years. So we have to help them understand their own limitations, what it is that they need, but we also have to be ready to help them navigate through this new terrain. Military vets are the least likely group of all those marginalized populations I've talked about. They're the least likely to ask for help.
Wow.
They are not going to ask for help. They'll say they'll figure it out one way or another. But having someone who is in the position as the assistant director there, Chiquita Lovelace, who spent 20 years in the Navy, who can say, I know exactly what you're going through, has made all the difference in the world.
And we should take this opportunity to jointly thank every last man and woman for their service and the fact that they're continuing their education as it relates to going to the University of Northern Iowa, outstanding regional institution. In your capacity, you talk about those various groups. What are some of the exciting things that you are doing? And then I do have that question that I have to ask you about this
It's
24/7
okay.
report.
It's okay.
But what are some of the things that you're doing to grow your own in the Greater Cedar Valley? The 10 and 12-year-olds won't remain 10 and 12, and they need to be a part of the Greater Cedar Valley productivity in the second half of the 21st century. So are you doing anything in your office that deals with that particular population?
Well, we've got one of our own programs, and then we support another program. If anyone's been paying attention at all to the population, what you're seeing is a decrease in the number of people graduating from high school, not because there are problems graduating, it's just there aren't that many people anymore. We just don't have that boom anymore of individuals coming out of high school, which means all of the colleges and universities are after all of the same students.
Okay.
So we have to find ways to make the University of Northern Iowa not just attractive to students, but also accessible. So you start to look at your populations, and when I talk about marginalized populations, some of those populations that we haven't thought about include, especially in the Cedar Valley, African Americans, immigrants, and Hispanic individuals or Hispanic Americans.
And Bosnians,
they're among our immigrants.
Okay.
So what we've done is we've built two programs. The first one is called Discover the Dream. That one is near and dear to my heart, and I'll talk a little bit about why in just a second. But basically what it does is it takes sixth graders.
Okay.
And, we should say rising sixth graders. So the summer before their sixth grade year begins, they are in what we call our fifth grade leadership program. That takes place at UNIQ. It's 4 weeks, every 5 days a week, and they have breakfast and lunch there. They also have extracurricular activities and curricular activities. We hire UNI students who work with them on reading, on math, but they also do projects. They conduct projects, complete various projects. They get to talk about things like health. They talk about keeping themselves in safe relationships. So it sort of runs the gamut for those 4 weeks, and it's an amazing program. It's great to see the students grow in such a short period of time.
Do you have, at the end, can you, if a parent or a child is interested in their watching, do you have a phone number, how they could contact you regarding Discover the
Dream. They could definitely call me at 319-273-2820.
Okay.
But if you stay in that program with us through the 12th grade, we will pay tuition for you to attend the University of Northern Iowa.
Full tuition.
Full tuition for 4 years plus
you heard
1
it
summer.
First from the Chief Diversity Officer, full tuition.
But we only take 40 kids a year.
Okay.
And you are recommended by your guidance counselor or a teacher.
Okay.
So
it's that program, and are there any other programs to address? I'm a baby boomer. You're not.
No.
Are there any other programs how we have to reconfigure bringing students into the sphere of UNI? Has there been any other initiatives?
Absolutely. The way that we used to recruit simply doesn't work anymore. And you can't just open the door and hope that people will come in. So what we do now with we call it the 3P program or Panther Promise program, what we do now is we've got 21 schools out of the 450 or so high schools in Iowa. And of those 21 are in the program. Cedar Rapids, Waterloo, some in Dubuque, Marshalltown, Fort Dodge. What we do is send a bus.
Okay.
Or sometimes two, depending on how many students want to come in. You got to want to come and visit the university. You have to have a GPA that would make you eligible to come to the university, and have a guidance counselor or teacher say that you are a student who would succeed in a 4-year environment.
And what is that GPA, by the way, quickly?
The GPA, I believe it's 275.
Okay.
275.
Okay.
But there are other things that go into
grade point average.
Grade point average goes in to figuring it. ACT score. Have you taken AP courses? and will you succeed in a 4-year environment? But we put you on the bus, we bring you up here, we have you for half the day. You get to, usually you'll meet our president and our provost. You also will fill out an application to attend the university. You'll see residence halls, you'll eat in the residence halls. Depending on which group it is, you may do some leadership activities in our Center for Multicultural Education, or you may actually visit classrooms. Just to get a feel for, is this the right place for me? And through that program, we just started last year, and about a third of the students who came up that way have actually signed up for orientation,
Well,
which means they're going to come to school for us.
That's outstanding. So
That's for
what
the
does
staff.
a third mean? How many students?
That's about 300 students.
Wow,
for
300
us.
students
Yeah.
out for the 3P program. Outstanding.
That was just
and
seniors.
Once again, we have to clarify this. It's not solely for African Americans.
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Only about 25% of the students through this program are going to be multicultural. The rest are very likely going to be white students because we look at, believe it or not, another marginalized population is rural white Iowans.
Wow. Yes.
Because they don't always have the income or the transportation to get to a visit day and find out, is this a school I even like?
So we also platform this outstanding show on YouTube. Who do they need a guidance counselor, a principal, or the director? Who do they need to talk to? Is there a telephone number?
They need to talk to their principal
Okay.
or a guidance counselor who can
Okay.
tell them whether their school is in the 3P program. We also do some 3P-like activities with other schools, and if they just call our Office of Admissions, they are more than happy to help out too.
So that's 300 students, and you just started. That is an outstanding program. Now, the hard question, which we have no gotcha questions. We won't
I don't
allow
believe
that
you.
on this show.
I don't believe you.
How is the University of Northern Iowa handling the 24/7 report? I had to ask, Gwen.
Yes, absolutely. We are the third largest employer in the Cedar Valley. And we have to stop and take a look at all of the information that went into the report. And it was all about discrepancies where African Americans don't meet up with white Iowans in the Cedar Valley. The biggest one is about jobs. When people are working, that affects a lot of things, a whole lot of things. When people are working, they contribute to the tax base.
Exactly.
When people are working, they, as long as they're making a livable wage, are not part of an underclass. An underclass doesn't contribute to your tax base. You support an underclass, and we don't want to do that. So what you and I has to do is look at the people we hire. We have to look across the board. Are we mirroring the Cedar Valley? Are we starting to have, for instance, more Hispanic or Hispanic American individuals who are working there, which is what you would assume based on the fact that we're seeing more, that population is the one that's growing the fastest in Iowa. Are we hiring immigrants? And if we aren't, why aren't we? And start to look at what kind of barriers there might be. One of our departments recently did some recruiting, hired a number of individuals who spoke Spanish as their first language.
Outstanding.
That made it difficult, though. One of the barriers for those individuals was it's hard for me to understand what it is you want me to do in this position because English isn't my first language. What we did was pair them up with our Department of Languages and Literatures, and they gave them time off work to have English courses, to take some English language courses.
English immersion.
Yep.
Immersion.
Yeah, it's about an hour a day doing that.
I don't keep up with the paper, but I do know that you're looking for a vice president for, I believe, institutional advancement.
We've made a hire, yes.
You have made it higher.
Yes, we have made a hire.
Oh, okay.
We're looking for all you have to do is look at jobs at UNI on our webpage, which is uni.edu, and all of our jobs will be listed there.
Okay.
I am more than happy to talk to people when they say, hey, I'm kind of interested in this position, but I'm wondering if. Now, I can never promise someone a job, but what I can do is tell you, the most important thing is going to be X, Y, and Z. These are the sorts of questions that you need to expect. I never know exactly which
Because
questions.
you're not on the search
right.
committees yet.
But I can
that's
tell
also
you, these are some things
incorporated.
that you need to be aware of when
So,
you're looking at a job.
How are you doing over there? Meaning in terms of the intentionality of hiring not just African Americans but people of color.
Our numbers are not the best, especially in the area of African Americans. We seem to be something of a revolving door, especially when we hire people from outside of the Cedar Valley. We hire them, they might stay 3 or 4 years, and then they're gone.
Has there been any tracking as to why that happens in terms of sustainability here?
Yes, it's mostly about climate. About the climate at the
About
the climate of
weather?
the institution. No, it's not about it being cold. Otherwise, Buffalo, New York would be barren. It is about the climate of the institution, and we are looking at that as a twofold opportunity. It's an opportunity for the person coming in, because our climate isn't going to feel like Iowa, isn't going to feel like University of Maryland and Baltimore, what have you. But it's also an opportunity for us to say to our new employees, this is how we're going to do some very intentional onboarding or helping the individual to be more comfortable in the space, but also be more comfortable in the Cedar Valley.
Yeah, and I do know that we do have, and I don't want to run short of time because I see you have all these learned books here and all that good stuff, but so often in higher education, the president and the board, there's intentionality and they're purposeful, and I do know that President Nook is. But from what is there that kind of nurturing, from what I'm hearing, that needs to be buttressed in terms of people of color, not just African Americans.
It absolutely does, and we are slowly putting those pieces together. And you have to remember that UNI is pretty much a small city.
Yes.
When you break it down, there's about 2,000 employees, around 11,000 students, and that's 13,000 people. We have a police force. The president's our mayor. So you have to look at it like a city, and how would you go about infusing these sorts of values in a city. Based on the general curve that when people talk about diversity, they say you've got about 20% of a population is not going to be with you no matter what you do. They've made up their minds they're not having it. 20% on this end of the continuum are with you, that's your choir. So that means you've got 60% in the middle who can sway. Okay. We got to spend our time working on that 60% in the middle.
So I see that you brought some books here and intentionality as we're speaking about. What are some of the things that you're doing to deal with diversification?
Well,
diversifying rather.
This is just about one of the programs that I started, and it's the President's Diversity Common Read. And what we do is we choose a book around a diverse theme, and then the campus has the option of reading it. So I think with our first one, we had around 200, just over 200 people who opted in. And that's everyone from students to faculty to staff can read the book. And then we have the author come to campus.
Oh, good.
So our very first one was extremely successful, and that was White Rage by Carol Anderson. It's actually more of a very easy to read history that starts in America at the end of slavery. We all have this sense that once slavery was over, everything was great. The book tells the story of why it wasn't and how this country has continually changed.
So, and this is very interesting. We have to get you back. So we're running short of time.
That's okay.
What is this?
We did, our next one was about transgender men, called Daring to be a Man Among Men, focused on a pioneer in that area, Lou Sullivan, and the author, Bryce Smith, came to campus, and that was fantastic for that population to have someone there with them to talk about the issues around being transgender. And then we actually had a student, I'm sorry, not a student, but one of our residence hall coordinators wanted to have a book read around religion. So he suggested this book, and we did the common read the next semester. We usually only have one per academic year. But last semester we did Faithiest.
So you started the book read.
Yes.
Okay, somebody I know started a book reading. I'm very proud of you on that. In closing, if folks want to get involved with you as Chief Diversity Officer, can you give them the information once again before we close out?
Absolutely. My email address is gwenne.berry, B-E as in boy, R-R-Y, @uni.edu. And my phone number is 319-273-2820. I'm more than happy to talk about ideas, invite people in. They may have ideas for speakers, what have you. More than happy to hear it.
Well, that's good, and I truly enjoyed this, and I hope that our viewing audience learned a lot more about UNI diversity and the great things as we move forward. And thank you again, Gwen, for coming.
Absolutely.
Until next time, that is our show. On behalf of all of us at CrossTalk Waterloo, please stay informed, stay engaged, and stay on top of the issues. I am Dr. John Berry. Thank you for your time this time, and until next time. Take care.